Good morning, everybody. I promise I'll be really, really quick. Thanks for inviting me to be part of the panel today. Thank you, too, for allowing me to share my story of success with you. You know, I'm very used to public speaking. I've been an amateur actor for years. I have represented myself in the Court of Queen's Bench. And I have never been so nervous about a piece as I am this morning. So I brought my grandfather with me, and to borrow Susan's phrase, I wore my kick-ass shoes to give me some confidence. Thank you. You know, I've struggled to identify myself as homeless, and it's only been through conversations with YWCA staff and meeting Susan Scott that I began to understand that homelessness takes on different forms for women. Between 2008 and 2009, I lost my role as a mother, as a homemaker, a wife. I lost my role as a daughter, as a sister, as a businesswoman, as an entrepreneur. It sounds bloody pathetic when you put it all together. I lost my home to foreclosure. I had no employment or prospects of employment, and no reliable income. But with all that, I have never spent an evening or a night without a bed. I've never spent a night without a roof over my head. I've never spent a day or a night on the street. So I struggled to identify myself as homeless. But I realize now that homelessness, for me, got to the point where I lost me. But my new beginning and my experience with successful services, safe housing and communities started on May 12th, 2010. On that day, I was given an ultimatum to have a full mental assessment or be involuntarily committed because I was considered mentally unstable. I went to a Calgary Health Services clinic, and I thank God that the woman there recognized what was happening to me and would not let me return to the people who had forced me to see her. I had never considered myself abused or vulnerable, but her words, "Colette, it's not safe for you to go back there," have stayed with me, so much so that I've not seen any of those people, my siblings and their spouses, since that day. This wonderful woman, and I'm ashamed to say I do not remember her name, called in an emergency housing team and offered me a room in a lovely home in the community. They called it respite housing. It was a separate suite at the front of the house, a group home for people with mental illness. I stayed there for 10 days, twice the usual allotted time, while CHS helped me find a place at the YWCA Mary Dover House. It was a bright Saturday afternoon that I met with a client services worker at Mary Dover House. She was lovely. But the longer the interview went on, the more out of place I felt. My answer to all of the questions about drugs, alcohol, violence, safety concerns was no. I had about $1,000 in my bank account at the time, but I had nowhere else to go. So I moved into the Mary Dover House that evening, and I was shell-shocked. I was 49 years old. My entire world was in the suitcase that I was dragging behind me. I was staring at a row of bunk beds where I was told I was sleeping that night. And I had 2 locks in my hand for the dresser that had been assigned to me. It was just after 10:30 when a woman came in to do a dorm check, said goodnight, and left. I honestly felt like I was in one of those TV shows about women prisons. I made the bed, the upper bunk, as quickly as I could without looking around me. I got in, rolled over to face the wall, and cried myself to sleep. I didn't see anybody from the YWCA staff for almost 3 weeks. And when I finally met my caseworker, she was so young, she could have been my daughter. I didn't see how anyone so young could relate to my circumstances. And one of the questions she asked me was whether or not I was interested in transitional housing. I didn't know what that was, but I said no anyway because I couldn't see that it would take very long for me to get a job and find a home of my own. The next day I received a note from the caseworker that I had overstayed my time in the dorm, and since I didn't want transitional housing, I had 5 days to vacate the Y. Another woman, a 52-year-old PhD, newly located to Calgary from PEI, got the same notice. This caused absolute panic among the other women in the dorm because we had all been there for 3 weeks or more already. I requested a meeting with the director of the YWCA, and she brought the caseworker in so we could all resolve this situation together. And that was the first time since I had entered the Y that anyone explained to me how the process works, what my options were for housing. I left that meeting having decided to stay in transitional housing, and within the next few days I moved into a shared room in the Mary Dover house. For the next 4 months, I worked intermittently and temporarily. I found peace and joy cooking and baking in the community kitchen at the Y. I built friendships. I became surrogate mother to some of the younger women and surrogate grandmother to their children. And I was starting to feel like me again. In July or August of last year, I had a meeting with the housing team of the YWCA about accessing the Rapid Exit program. That meeting with Gail and Val was the first time I shared my story with anyone from the YWCA. The difference was they are mature, compassionate, empathetic women who asked me about me. They wanted to know who I was, what had brought me to the Mary Dover house, where I wanted to go, and how they could help me get there. When Gail said, Colette, you've lost so much, I began to understand that the emotional pain that I was experiencing could be as debilitating and traumatic as some of the physical and violence that some other women have experienced. So if we fast forward to November, Gail left me an urgent voicemail for me to meet with her. She told me there was an apartment available right away, but I had to make the decision right away if I wanted it. We went to see it, and let me tell you, it's something to see. What used to be an executive hotel in one of the most desirable neighborhoods in Calgary is now owned by the Calgary Homeless Foundation, who asked the YWCA to house people in it. I lived there at the Ophelia with 13 of my beautiful sisters from the YWCA Mary Dover house. We are a success. I thank God for the people who are Calgary Health Services, YWCA Mary Dover House, and the Calgary Homeless Foundation. I am so grateful to continue that success and share that success through projects like Housing First Photo Voice, which we'll be presenting this afternoon. We are blessed by the kindness of strangers, like Mr. Scott Haggins of Cedar Glen Homes, who believes this conference is so important, he sponsored 7 of us to come here this week. What is happening here is important. It is saving and changing lives. It did mine. Thank you.